So in this version that I'm even including other characters like the betrothed, which is Count Carlo, but it doesn't have to be. And the old flame is the pirate king, but can also be someone else. Confidant is like a friend, and then we had custom character. If you just want to stick to the original 4 without the lady, go ahead and pitch your choice. You can change their names if you want. Naomi Bishop is the bodyguard. A smuggler is the captain, Cyrus Vance. Fixer is the mechanic, Theo Arkham. Sky Sailor is the goblin character, Snargle. I purposely just left it as Sky Sailor instead of saying goblin, because I want people to have the opportunity to play maybe an ethnic minority, not necessarily a goblin.
I think I would probably lean toward the smuggler.
I was going to suggest the fixer.
I like the Sky Sailor, Snargle. I think that's an interesting character.
Who feels like they're comfortable going first?
I can go first. Bodyguard works for me. We'll stick with that.
You can put me down as third. 1, 2, 3, 4.
We will do the 2 hours version.
What was the outcome of a sparring match between you and her? Naomi, Lady Blackbird's bodyguard, won the sparring match.
How?
Brute strength. We sparred with swords, and I engaged the lady and just overpowered her into the ground.
What was the occasion?
Her birthday.
Why were you sparring with a lady on her birthday?
It was just part of the party festivities, part of the atmosphere.
How did you feel about this?
I felt fine about it. That's typically the outcome of our tests of strength, I think. But obviously, I let her save face later on.
Wouldn't you want a bodyguard to be stronger than you are, really? I don't see any reason to be embarrassed by that. Why does the owl, your raggedy sky ship, give you hope? It's freedom, man. It's how you get from one place to another. You need that if you're going to be, bringing some products along with you. It gets you out there and it's life.
But the Owl's not just any other ship, is it?
I mean, it's not my ship, but it's the one that I'm on at the moment. And so, you got to take what you have.
If it gives you freedom from what?
Freedom from just being confined to boring old life. Like one location, people just hang out there. You get to go around and see different places, make a little coin on the side.
What is your relationship with death? Personal and intimate. Gale used to be a burglar, essentially a professional thief, and while is no longer, now is a more mechanic, spending all his days fixing up the owl, making sure that his captain has the freedom of the area. He still remembers that first love of lifting something that's not his out someone's building. The thrill of just taking it and putting it inside his jacket and climbing silently out the window. It's his first love.
What did he steal first?
It was a slightly older vase that was just sitting just behind a window. It was exposed for everyone who was walking past to see. He was very young. Hale had just been taught how to pick locks. So he managed to slip a bit of wire up under the window frame, lift the lock, window came up, took the vase and ran as fast as he could, even though there was no one in the house.
What is something you wouldn't steal?
There's no particular item you wouldn't steal. It's more who I'd steal it from. I wouldn't steal from my friends or those people I had some sense of loyalty towards. From anyone else, anything's fair game.
Would you feel remorse if you stole something with much more sentimental value than actual monetary value to the person that you stole it from?
No, because if I stole something which had no monetary value, or very little monetary value, then it would be because it had sentimental value for me. That would be fine. It would be my sentimental value versus theirs, so I'm perfectly okay with that.
Who does the captain like more, you or the mechanic?
Some questions in this game might pit you against another player in the group. If you don't want that kind of antagonism in the atmosphere of our session, you're welcome to remove it. You don't have to answer every question. But if you want to, go ahead.
This is potentially interesting conflict. I think in the basic nature of our roles, the captain likes the mechanic more. I tend to create problems. I tend to take more risks, and the mechanic tends to fix them. I'm the one who pushes the engines too hard, and the mechanic figures out how to make it work. And there is a tension there where I'm the one who tries to get away with things, and the mechanic is the one who actually makes it work. And I think the captain likes the mechanic more because of it.
Have you taken any risks that you regret?
Not on this ship. The ship's still together. It's still flying. It's still good. But in my younger days, I had taken risks that ultimately caused damage and ships not to be able to work. And that's what I regret, and that's what I learned from.
How does the captain show that he likes Hale more than you? How do you know?
The captain tends to speak declaratory sentences to me. Do this, get us here, set that course. And yet there are questions that are asked of the mechanic, actually asking how the mechanic's doing, what the day is, what is the status of the engine room. It's something I notice as a power difference. I am spoken to, I am not inquired of.
Who was your biggest rival in the pits? I think my strongest rival was Uriah Flint's brother, Uriel Flint. He was a pirate with his brother for a long time, but he got caught eventually and was sentenced to the pits. And so we fought each other maybe a half dozen times during our time there.
What was the score between you in the dozen times that you fought?
50-50, actually. We both had each other's number a few times. I won the most recent one, so might have some bragging rights for that reason.
What was the moment that you realized you two were a rivalry?
Well, his hammer was right in my face while I was lying in the ground. That was the first time I'd been beaten in the pits, and I knew then that I wanted a rematch.
If you asked him this question, would he say that you are his biggest rival?
I don't think he would. I think he saw his brother as his biggest rival, and no one was going to take that away.
What reputation have you heard of Lady Blackbird or her family while you were still an Imperial soldier? You know, she sounded like a nice lady, very beautiful, rumors said.
What was the moment where you stopped being an Imperial soldier?
I was kind of kicked out about 8 years ago, caught doing some untoward activities. You know, they didn't take too kindly to smuggling.
Does that mean you were smuggling while a soldier?
For like 3 or 4 years, yeah. I flew under the radar for a while. The ships they use, they've got plenty of space to store stuff.
When you were smuggling, when you were an Imperial soldier, were you stealing from the Empire at all?
I mean, stealing is such a harsh word, really. Like, I was not taking anything that belonged to the Empire. I was simply depriving them of some import taxes that they might otherwise have collected.
Why did you never join a crime syndicate on the dark side of Nightport when they offered you a much richer lifestyle? When I was at the level of skill that they were willing to take me on, I had learnt to value my freedom, and that is also why I had a similar sort of viewpoint on freedom to Captain Vance. And that I want to go out and see the solar system, see all the wonderful places, and steal pretty things from them.
Did you have any offers or overtures from any crime syndicate in Nightport?
Sort of open offers. The people that I learned with, my peers among the street urchins, they went on to positions in various crime organisations. They suggest that perhaps I come and join them. In fact, I wanted more than Nightport. Captain Vance provides that for me.
One of those crime syndicates was mad at you for turning them down. Who were they and why?
SR family. No one really knows what the SR stands for. They keep that a secret only for their members. Shibboleth, so they can identify each other. But I've never joined them. They were particularly unhappy. None of my friends went to work for them. I accidentally stole from them. I didn't realise that the business was under their protection. When they came for me, revenge, and let me know how the streets worked, that I couldn't steal from them. Wasn't allowed. I should have known better. Their offer was basically join us or else. It's almost like they wanted me to break into that place. I took the third option that they didn't specify, which was jump on the spaceship out of town as quickly as possible. In Nightport, I need to be careful with them.
Why did you become a pilot? I realized there wasn't anything too different between falling and flying. When I was younger, I used to be thrilled by jumping off of things into water, cliffs, and high areas. And when I realized flying was that, but so much more, I knew I was in love with it. There's the moment of letting go of control and also having complete control over the vessel that I find so amazing.
What was your first ship?
My first ship was a short distance transport little more than a planetary taxi, getting people back and forth. Wealthy people who just needed to go and quickly hire a small ship, a passenger transport to get them from point A to point B in a relatively short amount of time. And it's from that that I learned some of the finer, smaller points of piloting that eventually translated into the bigger ships that we're in now.
Do you have a preference for flying big ships versus smaller ships, or relatedly, ships that are more modern and advanced versus their actual cable controls and stuff everywhere?
The bigger the ship, the bigger the jump. It's that fear, that control that is so wonderful. In terms of more modern versus older, I think there's something I like about the older ones a little bit. About newer or otherwise, it's more the ability, can myself and the mechanic rewire something on the fly if we need to? Can we fix or change something when we need to because something has suddenly become scary or at risk? And can we react to that?
What don't you like about being a pilot?
The contrast of that freedom that I talk about, that scariness of falling and flying and the ability to go anywhere, and then realizing ultimately you're being given an order of where to go. It's not really your course to set. And I know that's part of the trade-off of just getting to fly, of not being the person who has to make the decisions and who has to be responsible for the whole ship. But I also feel it, and I feel the limit on the freedom that I love.
Why do you think her old flame is not worthy of her? He's not nobility, for one. He is a pirate who I just think is probably not trustworthy in general.
Does that mean that you think that the nobles are just better people than pit fighters and the like?
Not necessarily. I just think highly enough of the Lady Blackbird. I know what she's capable of. I think that she deserves to have power in a way that's sort of out in the open, I guess, and not necessarily behind the scenes as she would be with a pirate.
What skill have you learned from her? The ability to be more gracious and just not curt with people. Maybe gracious is not entirely the right word, but if you're in the military, everything's sort of matter of fact, just sort of state things, just be blunt. You know, you can sort of pull back from that a bit when talking to people. Catch more flies with honey, sugar, whatever it is.
Imagine there's a time when her less rigorous nature frustrated you before you've come around to this point of view. What was that like, or what was that?
In some sense, the skill is not just being able to speak in that way, but also see through the wording that people chose and why they said the particular words they chose and what they really mean. And that took a little bit of adjustment on my part because, yeah, there was a little bit, it was like, well, why don't you just say what you want? But you learn to tease out those details, little finer points of communication.
Who among her companions saved your life on the crime-infested Nightfall? When I stole from the SR family, it was Captain Vance who took me on and gave me a chance at short notice to jump on the Owl, sail out across the system.
Did they give you a term of some kind, condition?
It's awfully generous for the captain to put their neck out for you in violation of the SR family's wishes.
Well, he might not know about that bit. Hale was, honest about his background and his skill set. May have left out the details of some of the relationships he left behind, in what state he left them behind.
Did you provide any reason that you were looking for work on short notice?
To travel, see a life beyond Nightfall. That was definitely true. I could also see that the captain felt the same way, so I was sort of making sure I was playing on our shared desires for how to live our lives, and maybe play that up a bit more than you would normally. I didn't know him then. Now I know him better. I don't need to try doing those things quite as much, or at all. Depends on the occasion and what to do. If I need a really fancy tool to fix something, maybe I'll play things up a bit. What did the captain think when Carol first turned up? and started talking about wanting to sail the Sky Seas.
Look, I have seen kind of the ways of the world in some sense, so I don't fully believe that you are looking for that on super short notice, and it's very important. But hey, you know what? I'm sure there's some truth to it. So, hey, welcome aboard.
If any of her companions upsets you, how do you keep control over your anger? I deal with my being upset internally by going in, and even when I'm doing my last example, what I talked about, where I find the joy, it's still something I take very quietly and very alone, and very much so in my own space. I'm not one to commiserate or share my joy or my upsetness. When someone upsets me, it's very much so inside my own space. It's my own grumbling to myself. It's me talking to the ship as I pilot it.
Is there anything in particular that gets under your skin?
The mechanic sets the engine in such a way that, at least the mechanic argues, that it's less likely to strain and stress and break. But what I genuinely believe is the pilot, and I can feel when I fly it, is it's actually limiting the ship. And that is the thing that drives me more upset than anything, is I understand what you're doing, but you're wrong. And I won't talk it out with the mechanic, which is very much so what my character won't do, is actually face it and talk about it, but instead just seethes over it.
How has advancing technology not overtaken sorcery in this era? Practicality in a lot of ways. Maybe our technology is still heavy or expensive. I'm sure the materials are worth a lot more. Sorcery is more rare, but it doesn't require you to carry around a bunch of equipment. It's a little bit less difficult to maintain.
You're someone who is used to dealing in power. How you gained your notoriety, your fame, as a bodyguard in the pit, is through power. How do you deal with the relationship of a power of sorcery that is so different than yours?
I am scared. I distrust it. Lady Blackbird is a trusted friend. We're not actively scared of her, but the magic that she possesses is definitely scary, I think.
What do you admire about Lady Blackbird besides her presence? She's been on the ship for a little bit and gotten to know her a little bit more personally. She puts on this air, and you have to learn how to see through it a little bit.
The first time you saw Lady Blackbird, what effect did she have on you?
She was pretty captivating, to be honest.
Do you feel like she's aware of that effect on you, and has she taken advantage of it by getting on this ship?
I would not be at all surprised if the answer to both of those questions is yes. I would also guess that I'm not the first such person, but at least for the time being, I think I'm okay with it. And I mean, she's not putting the ship in any additional peril relative to what it would otherwise be.
What, if anything, do you think Lady Blackbird admires about you?
Evade detection. We've got lots of experience there. On the ship level, the skills of being able to actually carry out the mission and get her to the pirate homeworld.
What is a prominent characteristic of architecture in the free worlds? It's very common to have little statues of various fantastical creatures carved into the walls or the rooftops of buildings. Things like medieval cathedral, with those little gargoyles sitting on top of the roof.
Did you steal one of those?
Wouldn't really be worth it. They're quite heavy and solid, and there's tons of them around. For a burglar's point of view, it's more used to leave them there so you can hang off them or abseil down from them. But they're very handy when breaking into a building in that regard. Gargoyles
are traditionally meant to ward off things. What are they meant to ward off now in this world?
Evil spirits. You can see out of the corner of your eye, but when you stare at them, they're never there. There's a vague sense that there's something around you. But the gargoyles, they're always sitting there staring out. But these things are always being glared at. You can't make it into the building. If you look away, then they can sneak past you. Who among your companions told you a secret about the free worlds that no one else knew about? And what was that secret? At a certain point late night on one of the travels, the fixer told me about Nightport and told me
about the gangs there. In fact, he told me this secret about the thing he would have stayed there for. It was a family member, a sibling perhaps, a moment of not weakness, but almost, personal intimacy of that's what's really you. That is so rare out here when we smuggle and we run on ships. And it was unusual and it was noteworthy. It brought us closer as crew in terms of who we were, more about the society as a whole. More about us as pirates, as people who smuggle, is we don't get the luxury of those kind of connections. And so there's something in the free world where if you want to survive, if you want to thrive and you're not nobility, you almost have to be that kind of disconnected. You have to be that kind of, no, of course I have no weakness, no connection. Of course I'm willing to risk everything. And so to see it is kind of shocking, but also kind of amazing and kind of touching.
Yep, that looks me.
Who among her companions do you owe a favor from? I think that I owe a favor to the smuggler captain just for letting us onto the ship, agreeing to the mission.
I'm presuming that the bodyguard negotiated passage onto the ship. How did that negotiation go?
It mostly went through Lady Blackbird, but when the subject of the bodyguard came up, I think there was a little bit of physical intimidation at play there. I think that I kind of stepped up and maybe intertwined my fingers a little bit as if I was getting ready for a fight.
Naomi can be persuasive. What is your one quality that Lady Blackbird can barely tolerate? I tend to play it a little loosey-goosey when it comes to precautions against being tracked or followed or apparently captured. Lady Blackbird thinks that I'm a little too cavalier about that kind of thing.
How does she tell you that you're being too cavalier?
She'll say things like, are you sure we should saying, hey, we're the owl when we're docked at some random port, mentioning to some acquaintances of mine that, yeah, we're heading out to the remnants. I really wish you wouldn't say that. Loose lips sink ships. But they're all cool, the people I tell.
Have you ever seen a real sky squid? Yes, everyone on the crew has seen a real sky squid. Had to run from one. Snargle was keen to see it out and have a little play with it. Or at least that's what it seemed like to me. He was getting very close to it. I'm sure he would say that there was no problem at all. That was the time I felt most concerned about the fact that I throttled the accelerator a little bit. I probably shouldn't have done that. Snargle was good enough to get away.
What is the scariest thing she has done in your presence? I think it was one time shortly after we brought her on the ship that she used her sorcery. I'm very much so a creature of the ship, of what it can do, of machinery, and like the mechanic, I will say little prayers to make the ship go faster or make a certain turn. It's not the same as seeing someone wield a fury and ferociousness. It was terrifying, and it was shortly after she came on, we had a conflict. Not the one we're in now with the Empire, but she had to use her magic, and it was very, very scary.
What did she do?
It was an offshoot, a faction of the SR family. In that moment, we were at very, very real risk of being boarded and being overtaken. She reached into her magic, and her arms crackled with electricity, and her eyes glowed with a certain fury that I had not seen before. The calm, the austereness, the grace that I had seen in her before was suddenly gone. In this moment of her tapping into otherness, whether it was her or her channeling something was unknown, and it became something very strong and strange and terrifying.
Was that Snargle's first time encountering magic?
Well, Snargle might swear that there are one or two times that his ability to do things to the ship was magic. It might be the first time he's seen magic.
Yet those SR family gangs actually came for the lady or for Kale?
Neither. I think it was just the sheer happenstance of being at the same score at the same time. There was a derelict vessel that had been shipping lithium. We were salvaging it, but it was also a known derelict vessel that had broken down within the last week. And so there was some competition that we knew was going to happen for it, and we were trying to get there and get in and out faster than anyone else. And as it so happened, the R family showed up at almost the exact same time, and conflict ensued.
What has been your proudest achievement? Fighting my way out of the fighting pits, I think, was probably the proudest I've been and the most relieved.
How did you fight your way out of the fighting pits?
A pretty convoluted tournament, seeded based on our pit records. There was a lot of betting, a lot of gambling and stuff going on in the background. Ultimately, from my perspective, just 8 straight wins crowned me the champion of the tournament and won me my freedom.
Did you bet on yourself?
Towards the end, I did.
In that tournament, you caught the lady's eye, and that's how you became her bodyguard. What moment was that caught her eye?
In the finals, we were supposed to fight to the death. It was a clear victory. I had them in a position to do so, but I just refused to kill them. And nobody questioned me.
Was that last opponent Oreo?
It was actually.
What is the one thing that Lady Blackbird did that made you respect her regardless of her wealth and status? We're not exactly amongst the nobility, but she still treats us with respect, doesn't talk down to us. She'll express disagreements, but it's not done in a condescending way or anything like that. So respect begets respect.
What did she destroy in your presence? How did it affect you? Lady Blackbird scares me. She's very polite, but that's the way she's trained as a noble. To Kale, at least, it seems that a lot of that comes from the fact that she is so much more powerful than anyone else on this ship. She can afford to be polite and nice to us because she could destroy us all with barely lifting a finger. Kale realized this when she destroyed a sugar cube. She was having tea. She has so much power that without thinking and while maintaining a nice and pleasant conversation, she was just using so much sorcery to pour out, like to levitate the teapot, heat it up, pour it out, lift up the sugar cube, move it across, crumble it, and drop it into the tea completely nonchalantly. Just didn't even need to think about it. That, that could just as easily have been kale being lifted up and heated up, and it would have been absolutely nothing to her at all. Whereas kale knows a bit of magic, has to put a lot of effort in, requires preparation, planning, it's draining.
What is the difference between that small moment and those big moments that we've seen also?
Just the sheer nonchalance. It's when she did the big fight that you described, everyone's doing everything they can. It's a high tension moment, but we were all expecting something to be done. With the sugar cube, there wasn't actually any thought involved in her being able to do this. It was like a sort of unguarded moment.
Lady Blackbird is a master of disguise. Why did she choose to reveal her identity to you? Someone imperious, someone strong, someone obviously connected, but no idea who she was until we got in that fight with the RS family, until we hit that moment where she showed her power. And I realized, oh, this is not just some rich person getting passage on our ship. This is a noble sorcerer. And in fact, if the rumors going around on the communication wires are accurate, this is the Lady Blackbird. Oh my goodness. We have the most important stowaway / escapee / wanted individual in the Empire on our boat, and has a strong influence over how this ship is going, how, where we're going, what we're taking on. And it was an odd moment of going from oh, this is some feckless noble that whatever your coin buys you passage to, oh no, oh boy, we have someone scarily powerful on this ship.
Did you acknowledge to Lady Blackbird that you know who she is?
The moment of the battle, no, because I was probably too slack-jawed to really say anything that definitive. But I think shortly after the battle, Snargle had the conversation with her. I know the captain gives me orders, but I also know you are putting some influence on our ship. Who exactly is this influence coming from? Someone really wanted to know, all right, who are you? And even though he suspected, he wanted her to say openly, yes, I'm the Lady Blackbird, and kind of demanded that of her.
Was she hesitant to say it outright?
At that point, no. I didn't need to know that. Sure, her bodyguard did that. Sure, the captain might know that. Well, why would the pilot need to know that? I respect her for opening up very quickly and without reservation to me about that.
Why do you believe Lady Blackbird has the power to change the Empire? Naomi believe in both her sorcery power, but also her charisma.
How common is her power? How common is sorcery?
Naomi has never seen anybody this powerful. She's known plenty of people through her life, like Kale mentioned, that dabble and maybe even call themselves sorcerers. But Naomi, anyway, doesn't believe that there's anybody on par with Lady Blackbird. She certainly hasn't seen it, and she doubts that it exists.
What do you or Lady Blackbird think needs to change in the Empire?
For both of us is not just to stand up for the powerless people, make life better for the marginalized populations. Naomi specifically has an issue with people being sent to the fighting pits. She and the Lady Blackbird kind of agree that with the power that we have comes some responsibility to protect the people that can't protect themselves.
Who among her companions told you a secret about her, and what was that secret? That is Naomi. The secret is that even though Naomi wins, Lady Blackbird does a better job than you might expect, and with no apparent sorcery during the competition.
Do we have any idea where the Lady Blackbird received her training?
Can I pass that question off onto Naomi?
As far as Naomi knows, being a lady of nobility, she was never trained in fighting, but she was an avid watcher at the pits. So I think Naomi maybe assumes that she learned what she knows about fighting just from watching other people do it. And Naomi's taught her a thing or two probably since then. My question for Smuggler is if Naomi swore you to secrecy after sharing this.
I think that there was sort of like a don't spread this around kind of thing, but not a if you do, I will come break your kneecaps implication to it.
It's fair.
How skilled are you with the sword? And how do you think you'd compare to Naomi and Lady Blackbird?
Naomi would win. I would guess that Lady Blackbird and I are pretty evenly matched, although we've never actually dueled. So it's hard to say for sure.
What was the one decision you made that significantly changed your path in life? I'm going to pass it because for me it was the decision to break into the SR family building. Not that I knew it was an SR family building, and then to leave.
Even though I didn't realize it was important at the time, for me it was no more than you would think of being like an Uber or a Lyft driver. Now it was, taking short hops in rented ships within a planet itself, nothing further than that. But from that, I learned about my love of flying these ships and that moment of release and takeoff and control that I love. And I think it was that moment of just like, oh, I'm taking a job, but oh my goodness, this random job changed my life.
What would you be doing if you weren't flying?
Part of what I love is the risk and the control. So I'd definitely be looking for things that had that sense of risk and control. It would not be surprising if I ended up as some kind of thief, but on, obviously a more terrestrial basis. And what we do is definitely not thieving, is simply reliberating goods. I would be on a local gang, family syndicate kind of thing.
What skill have you learned from one of her companions? Naomi has learned a little bit of sleight of hand from Kale. Just having observed him around the ship, she kept a close eye and picked up a few ways to avert people's eyes.
Does Kale even know that you've done this?
I don't think she'd be so presumptuous as to think that Kale didn't know. If Kale was willing to share what he knew about it, would have at least made it obvious enough for Naomi to pick up on it.
Why has the Empire not yet conquered Haven, a beacon of the free world? They run the risk of there being protracted guerrilla warfare. There runs the risk of other free worlds allying against them, and it not being a simple, straightforward task, or at least not even as simple and straightforward as it seems like it could be. In some ways, the Empire has trouble keeping a full handle on what goes on the worlds that they do have control over, something that we exploit on a regular basis. And so extending that into an even more tenuous system there's a lot of risk there, and I think they're afraid of what the consequences might be. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens at some point, but that's why it hasn't happened yet.
What does Haven have that the Empire wants?
I don't think that there's any specific resource there that they want. They just want more.
Are there people on Haven who want to be part of the Empire? Or very few of them and inconsequential?
There's always going to be some nutcases out there, but they're a small minority, and I don't think are consequential.
Who are you most proud of in life? My twin sister, because she started from exactly the same place as me, but made a good life for herself on Nightport without having to resort to crime or hastily leaving the planet. Similar sort of level of magical power as I do, but has instead used it to go into local administration. Sounds boring, but it's good living.
Do you think that she would be proud of Kale?
No, not proud at all. She's changed her name. No one knows the connection between them, the rest of Kale's family. But Kale likes the idea that someone in the family has gone legit and can live a nice, relatively safe life. That means he can go off and be and do dangerous things.
Are you worried about her safety at the hands of the SR family, or do you think that like the name change?
She's secure at the moment because no one knows. As far as Kale knows, no one's worked it out.
What did Lady Blackbird shed a tear over when she thought no one was looking? When we were salvaging the lost ship, one of the crates of cargo we eventually won over and brought on board included cargo from her homeworld, silks and linens. And very privately, very quietly, Lady Blackbird had a moment where she realized what she had run from and what she was leaving and what was lost. And I think in that moment is when she took to actually mourn the life she was leaving. And although she wanted the life she's going to, there's a small bit of sadness. And this one particular linen, this one particular style of blanket that is one that, she always had and she always was familiar to her. In that moment, it just reminded her of home and it reminded her of things that made her safe and comfortable. And she realized she was leaving that and turning her back on that.
What was the worst thing Lady Blackbird did and that she has never regretted doing? There was a family that Naomi knew before she was in the pits, and Naomi maybe befriended the children of the family, and Lady Blackbird at some point later on fought against the father of the family and killed him. Naomi knew a little bit more about what that person had left behind, and the children specifically. Lady Blackbird was unaware of all this baggage, but Naomi always sort of saw it as kind of a misplaced anger on the lady's part to have gone after that specific person.
If she was ever questioned about that, how would she justify it?
Matter of factly, I think that this person was in the way of something that the lady thought she deserved or something that she wanted.
Is this something that you've ever spoken about to other people?
No, I don't think Naomi would have confided in anybody about it.
In what way will one of her companions compromise her goal? Why do you think so?
You can try to make it easier by defining that goal.
I'm going to define that as having a very clean break. She was mourning the loss over her old life a little bit. And as long as she has a reminder of what that life is, it will prevent just a completely clean break. And unfortunately, that reminder is going to be Naomi. It doesn't even have to be an overall bad thing. It's just that Naomi, I think, will serve as a reminder of the life that she left.
How did you work this out?
I don't know that she has really indicated it as such. It's just sort of me reasoning through like what it means, or what at least I think it means to leave stuff behind and then go on forward, and looking at who is coming along that path.
Do you think that Naomi realizes she represents the thing she's trying to leave behind?
She probably hasn't thought of it yet, but she might realize it at some point in the future, like once they actually have more separation.
What is something Lady Blackbird does often that annoys you. Putting sugar in your tea is the devil's work. It ruins perfectly good tea and should not be allowed.
What is Kale's preferred tea?
Kale takes great strength from a good, strong cup of tea to get him through the day.
Does the rest of the crew use sugar, or is Lady Black?
No one else in the crew takes sugar. I mean, if someone asks for it with sugar, you just go, no, not going to happen. Kale has taken it upon himself to be the standard tea maker on board the Owl. He makes sure it's the right tea, except for Lady Blackbird, who refuses to make her own.
What is the one quality about the free world that you dislike? In the Empire, you have your license. You have your fees laid out. You know what it's going to cost. And then the second I have to land on a free world planet, good heavens. Could be bribing this official, could be landing at this district, but not this one. Could be all kinds of things. At a certain level, as much as I appreciate the free world thing, I like a little bit of predictability of where I'm putting the ship down.
And they're all different too. Like I can't even pick one.
Every port, a different set of people you have to bribe and things you have to follow. At least in the Empire, you know what you're doing.
How often do you travel into the Empire?
Not that much. I consider myself a proud freeworlder, but this is one of those things where I'm like, as much as I'm not of the Empire, this one they got right.
Is the wild blue like outer space as we know it, or layers of breathable air above layers of corrosive clouds? I might pass it to the smuggler to see if the captain has any better idea than I do.
You can breathe out there. You don't need any fancy equipment. Definitely a little bit brisk, but you can go up on deck, and if you want to open the portholes, you can open the portholes. I recommend that you have them closed at least overnight, but hey, you do you.
She once told you a story that you believed is a lie. What was that story about, and why did you not tell her so? She told me a story about someone who used to work on her estate, who used to fix up their mechanical carriages, how she got along with this person and sort of help them out. And she was obviously just trying to build rapport with me. Like, oh, there's this other person who's doing something like you're doing on the ship, and offering suggestions. And this person said, perhaps this sort of thing would be helpful to when you build your motor. Something that I already know about, so I'm not feeling particularly out of place. And I just got the feeling that this person didn't really exist. Something about them just didn't feel right. If there was such a person, she certainly didn't know them as well as she was letting on. She was trying to be friendly with me. Perhaps she got some sense that I was uneasy in her presence and that she was trying to calm me. I didn't tell her so because it's nice to acknowledge the account, and I was also very happy for her to think that we were fine together because I'm actually a bit scared of her. If she thinks that we're friends now, that's just fine by me.
What was the worst thing you've ever done, but we'll do it again in a heartbeat? If I didn't have a ship, I would steal one again in a heartbeat, and I did it once before. Flying around the taxis, that it was great and all, but it was never my own ship. And at a certain point, I got fed up and just stole a ship. And I realized in that moment, that's the real freedom.
Is there a specific port or world where you would head to if you were going to steal a ship?
No, it's not like it's something I have planned.
What happened to that ship?
Well, that's a funny story. That's how I ended up meeting the captain. See, I know how to fly ships, but I don't know the most about taking care of them in the long term, or at least I didn't back then. As it so happened, I was ill-planned, ill-prepared, and more or less run out of gas. I was floating out there in the ether, and that's when the captain came past me, thinking I was a ship to be raided. How in the world me breaking down turned into the captain wanting to hire me as a pilot is beyond me. But apparently the captain saw something.
Did you name that ship?
At the time, I called it the Liberation, but now I look back and I call it the SS Life Lessons.
I'll just interject and say that if you can get a stolen ship out of port and through the planetary guards, that is a fine qualification for a pilot, particularly the kind of pilot that I need.
One of her companions completely changed your impression of them with a single action. What did they do? Naomi's first impression of Snargle was that he was a mediocre pilot and passive aggressive, and I think that his action skimming the side of the Sky Squid, and then shortly after that in our battle against the SR family, Naomi's impression changed a lot, that he is actually a great pilot. He knows what he's doing.
Were you aware the Snargle had no idea we were that close to a sky squid?
No, Naomi thought that it was Snargle's sense of wonder and wanting the rest of the crew to get that experience of being able to, reach out of our porthole and touch a sky squid.
It was Snargle's David Attenborough moment.
Who among her companions defended you when she accused you falsely? When we were negotiating for transportation, of course, the topic turned to price, and I had to defend my prices as being very reasonable. And the fact that we've got a good crew, a capable crew, she initially said that we were basically con men for trying to charge what we were trying to charge. But then Snargle chimed in and pointed out some of the exploits various members of the crew have gotten into. For example, stealing the Liberation. And no, we really know what we're doing, and we've got the skills to back it up.
Did you provide any references for the Lady Blackbird to check?
Most people in our line of work don't really want to be used as references. So it's more like news articles of such and such avoiding being captured. She's the ship that did the Kessel run in 12 parsecs.
Thank you. That's what I was thinking, and I didn't want to make the reference. Thank you.
Who among her companions do you trust the most and why? Captain Dan. We've flown together for probably half my life. He took me on when I needed it. He's always been a good captain. Always done right by me.
How does the Lady Blackbird attempt to pay you for your help when she cannot access her family's wealth anymore? She tries to pay us in influence and favors, and she knows these parts of the Empire, and she knows these officials, and she can get us into these ports, or she can get us through these checkpoints. And whether that's true or not, that combined with the promise of money at the end of the voyage, at least in Snargle's mind, been like, okay, that's how we're getting paid here.
Is it really enough?
I don't think it's my call to make if it's enough. If the captain says, all right, we've negotiated this, we're sailing. All right, we're sailing. This is a powerful, important person. This could bring us some good things, even though it's a little nebulous up front.
Do you suspect that the captain may have ulterior motives in taking such a nebulous payment?
I mean, I always expect the captain has ulterior motives, but I've developed enough of a trust for the captain that it's like, all right, the captain's going to work out a good deal for us. But I still also recognize, like, all right, it's a little different, but okay.
How close is the Empire to abolishing all forms of slavery for good? Not very close to abolishing slavery. They would argue that it's improving, but I don't think that any of us or anybody that Naomi knows has seen any tangible effects of the so-called improvements.
How much is legal versus illegal but not enforced appropriately? Is that the source of the dichotomy in the sense that they've made more things illegal, but it's never actually enforced and people are ignoring the law? Or
that might be the difference between the free worlds and some of the Empire's lands. Like maybe in the Empire's areas, there is legislation in theory that's just not enforced. But when the Empire comes into the free world, it's kind of open game, and they aren't playing by any rules in that case. They're just more willing to pick up people and throw them into slavery if they're from the free world.
What sort of people are sort of leading the fight against slavery inside the Empire? Is there a fight, or is it just something that's sort of slowly working its way through the administration?
I think there is a fight between the kind of old guard that's been in power and benefiting from the system and a new contingent that is coming from a place of trying to unite everybody. They're butting heads with the people that are in power, trying to get them to change their mind.
what did Lady Blackbird once say to you that opened up an old wound? We've had our disagreements over how cavalier I am about being captured by the Empire. She makes her opinions known, generally in a pretty respectful way, but there is one thing that she said that reminded me of many years ago when I lost a cargo and almost lost a ship, or was blamed for doing so, rather, even though it was not really my fault. I don't exactly, even to this day, know how they were tracking us exactly, but we didn't do a good enough job vetting the cargo. The ship was almost caught. We had to dump the cargo. What Lady Blackbird said, it was something along the lines of, if the Empire shows up in a ship, what are you going to do? Just dump us overboard? Which, of course, I would never do. We're talking about people versus cargo, obviously. But that was the one cargo that I've lost and still sort of a sore point.
What did you sacrifice in order to help her with the journey? Juicy information that I picked up along the way. Something about a relatively easy score. Not the sort of thing that Captain Vance would go for. It could get a bit bloody. Also because it may lead to her basically being able to gain access to her own ship and perhaps her own crew as it pulls the job off successfully. Then she won't be on my ship anymore.
How long, in Kale's mind, is it until Kale has their own ship, their own crew? The 5-year plan? Is it the 1-year plan?
It's a longer-term plan, 5-year plan, which is about as far as Kale can think ahead. Definitely in the back of his mind.
Naomi's greatest regret is the incident that landed her in the fighting pits. Naomi was sparring with noble kids, and she beat up on the wrong kid and a little bit too much. She was kind of defending her friend. She didn't murder anybody, but she did beat the kid up pretty good to the point of maybe breaking his hand or arm so he couldn't fight anymore. The parents, being nobles, pursued getting Naomi sent into slavery.
Who among her companions told you a secret about the Empire that not even the Lady Blackbird knew about? And what was that secret? The bodyguard told me a secret. It's a story told in the pits about a gladiator that rose up and became nobility. It's not a secret that the Empire lets out because the Empire wants people to believe that nobility is lineage, is family, and not something that can necessarily be earned. And the story of this one gladiator who rose up and became nobility is something they had to do and something they had to recognize, but ultimately something they keep very quiet. And I don't know if the lady knows about that. I don't know if the lady, the lady assumes she is her power because she is her family and she is what she inherited. While she is a great and powerful sorcerer and carries that power honestly, I don't know if it's ever occurred to her that it's something that can be earned up. The influence she has, the casting she has, is something that comes both out of how she carries herself, who she is, and also her magical power.
Even though the lady is fleeing the Empire, it's not because she dislikes the Empire per se or disagrees with its practices or policies. It's because of her personal connection. I don't think that she is completely delusional, like everything is fine and great in the Empire, but I don't think that she admits the depth of problems with it and levels of corruption, slavery, all that kind of thing that goes on within the Empire is a greater problem than she acknowledges.
And how you're saying that, like the sort of reason for her fleeing the Empire has to do with who she's marrying, not any ideological differences.
That is sort of bound up. Like, it's not that amongst the nobility arranged marriages are an uncommon occurrence. And so she, like, this would be one of the criticisms that she would levy against the Empire, but it's only one of its many, many problems.
This is the end card, so that's where everyone takes a turn to answer, and then the game is over.
I would just say that once she finally reaches her destination, that she treasured the relationship that she has with the Pirate King and don't take it for granted.
Kale was going to suggest that she not worry about her relationship with the Pirate King. He said that she should go off and see all the sights of the system, be a free spirit on her own ship, make her own way.
On its face, I have a moment where I'm slightly taken back, as it's the first time the lady has asked me a question. And much like I said earlier, the difference of people saying things to me versus asking me questions, I'm a little caught off guard, but I also respect it and treasure it a little bit. And I look at her and I say, like, we all have very strange dreams, and we all have our own weirdly earned dreams that not everyone else can understand. And if anything we figured out is to fight for them. And even when fighting doesn't take the most normal course, when you have a dream, whether it's, flying through the stars or you're a pirate king.
Naomi would tell Lady Blackbird that she's the most powerful sorcerer she's ever seen. A reminder that she has awesome abilities that is going to be able to change the world. And she's going to recommend that she use those abilities against the Empire and recommend that she stop taking sugar in her tea.
The numbers thing I need to recalculate. Maybe just to make it 50 cards instead of 80 cards for 2 hours.
Yeah, maybe a little button that just jumps to the end, yeah.
Sure.
I was actually, at the beginning, I was trying to work out if the cards were random, because it felt like they weren't. First, 3 or 4 times through, I thought they were almost targeted towards particular people, it felt.
The first 2 cards, they were random within a set that's specific for those characters. I took from the Lady Blackbird rule set. I didn't want it so that it forces people to pass a card or remove a card when it doesn't apply to them.
If that was intentional, then that was a good idea, because I thought that worked very well at the start. We got into it very quickly. I thought it was actually interesting. Later in the game, we got some more sort of vague questions about the larger society. So I guess that's the nature of the random cards. You play what comes up.
I thought everyone did very well. Evan, you were awesome.
I have not played anything like it before. Archipelago was as close as I've gotten. I think the settings questions, if they were earlier, might have been more comfortable, but I do think that the deeper questions earlier was probably a good thing overall.
Crichton, you have played For the Queen before. Do you think this slight variation benefits from the structure, or?
When I played through For the Queen, I don't spend as much time thinking about and building my character. I was trying to figure this out, how easily we flip between I and Snargle or I and my character. I don't necessarily think that's a loss of immersion when that happens, but I also think there's sort of a question of identity when that happens. We would all sort of come up with our own sort of bits of the stories, whether it was Brad's stuff with the gladiator pits or my stuff with the earlier cargo salvage mission. And I think we would all tend to pull from that, but it was limited how much we would cross into each other's fictions. Whether it's on us as players to do that better, or if there's a way to build that into the system to encourage that. We tended to sit inside our own lanes of stories. It took some work to get outside of them, but it was good when it did.
You're getting people's views of what has happened rather than the absolute truth. And the captain's view is biased by his appreciation for Lady Blackbird and stuff like that. I think it kind of works, but it's also a danger.
Yeah, there could be a fun confession booth thing to it. Absolutely. Yeah. Next week on Lady Blackbird Island.
I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought everybody did a great job. I didn't feel super disconnected overall. Some responses just working better when they're focused on ourselves rather than the group as a whole. What everybody's bringing up is just the challenge of applying such an open-ended system to a pre-existing IP, for lack of a better term. And I think that having Lady Blackbird specifically mentioned on all the cards maybe is something to think about if you're going to use generic character. I don't think that any of this is necessarily bad or anything, but I feel a disconnect between how specifically I was to be Naomi versus the Lady Blackbird that's mentioned in the questions. But I thought that was also an interesting aspect, and I'd love to play the game where we're playing some of the other classes that you came up with. I thought that sounded interesting.
I'm thinking about eventually just not have people read Lady Blackbird, the rule set, and just come in with these types of archetypes. So bodyguard, smuggler, fixer, it can refer to any kind of character without having to fill their shoes, and just use the questions to build themselves up. That's why I needed those questions that are specifically about the characters and not about Lady. So otherwise you have no idea what you're building up.
Because so much of role playing is telling stories about your character. And there's something powerful about saying, hey, this is a story about not me, and this is my story about a relationship with not me. Yeah, and I think that's what the game tries to encourage. So there's a little tension there that I think is kind of interesting to play with, that I think this game brings out.
For the queen, I know some questions are really personal. I don't know if I would want to directly just put myself in that position. So I want a little bit of abstracted away, like one more layer of character in between.
That's part of what I'm getting at too, is that there's just robust characters that we're playing. The game itself is meant to be open-ended, and you wanted to give us leeway to kind of adjust those characters as we wanted to. It was maybe too open-ended for somebody like me, but I mean, I think that we got through it well, and I did like that the cards were tied to specific characters. Just kind of makes my mind whirl about what kinds of things you could do with for the Queen Hex if you're not necessarily using one shared deck the whole time. It's kind of interesting.
What kind of variation would you come up with for the end card?
You have to give up Lady Blackbird to the Empire or risk being caught. Do you turn her in?
The last question might not be a bad place to tailor a little bit to what's happened throughout the session.
You could have like everyone write down a card and then everyone answer everyone's question. Or like you write a question for one specific other person.
Maybe just before the last question, like, great, what's one question you have for the rest of the crew? And then everyone has to answer that. And like that could get really interesting.